Ambassador Lee Dae-ho stood at the observation deck of Nexus Station, watching the endless stream of ships arriving from across the galaxy. The massive space station hung in neutral space like a glittering jewel, its rotating rings housing diplomats and representatives from every known civilization. Dae-ho had been posted here for 3 years, and he had never seen such frantic activity. Ships of every design imaginable docked at the station's countless ports, their crews rushing through corridors with expressions of barely controlled panic. The emergency alert had come 6 hours ago, transmitted simultaneously to every embassy on the station. The message was brief but terrifying. Immediate assembly required for all council representatives. Priority level, extinction event. Dae-ho had seen many crises during his diplomatic career, but nothing had ever carried that classification before. He adjusted his formal diplomatic uniform and checked his translation device one final time. As the human representative, he knew his voice would likely be the least important in whatever discussion was about to unfold. The human embassy was modest compared to the towering spires of the ethereal delegation or the sprawling biopods of the Hive Mind Collective. Earth was still considered a minor player in galactic politics, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 2 centuries ago. Most species barely acknowledged human existence, viewing them as curious newcomers who might eventually prove useful for manual labor or resource extraction. Dae-ho had grown accustomed to being dismissed or ignored in council sessions. His assistant, Kim Subin, approached with a worried expression. She carried a data pad containing what little intelligence they had managed to gather about the crisis. "Ambassador, we have confirmed reports from the Outer Rim territories," she said, her voice tight with concern. 3 star systems have gone completely dark in the past 48 hours. No distress signals, no final transmissions, nothing. It is as if they simply ceased to exist. Dae-ho studied the preliminary data, his trained diplomatic mind analyzing the implications. The affected systems were all heavily populated with billions of inhabitants across multiple species. For them to vanish without any communication suggested something far more dangerous than natural disaster or technological failure. "What do our intelligence networks suggest?" he asked. Subin hesitated before responding. The few automated monitoring stations that survived long enough to transmit data showed massive energy signatures consistent with organic technology. "The readings are unlike anything in our databases, but there are similarities to some very old legends from the galaxies, pre-spaceflight civilizations, stories about entities called the Voidborn Swarm." The name sent a chill down Dae-ho's spine. He had heard whispers of ancient threats during his diplomatic training, but most scholars dismissed such tales as primitive mythology. The galaxy had enjoyed unprecedented peace for over 1,000 years, with conflicts limited to trade disputes and territorial negotiations. The idea that something could threaten multiple star systems simultaneously seemed impossible in the modern age. The station's communication system crackled to life, announcing the immediate assembly of all diplomatic representatives in the Grand Council chamber. Dae-ho straightened his jacket and made his way through the station's main corridors, joining the flow of beings heading toward the political heart of galactic civilization. The corridors buzzed with anxious conversations in dozens of languages, while translation devices worked overtime to process the babel of worried voices. The Grand Council chamber was a marvel of engineering and diplomacy, designed to accommodate the environmental needs of hundreds of different species. Atmospheric zones shifted seamlessly from the methane-rich environment preferred by the gaseous collective to the high-gravity sections where the Stone Lords felt comfortable. At the center of the chamber sat the speaker's podium, surrounded by concentric rings of delegation seats that rose toward the domed ceiling like an ancient amphitheater. Dae-ho took his assigned seat in the newest section, where recent additions to galactic society were placed. Around him sat representatives from other young civilizations, all looking as confused and concerned as he felt. In the premium sections near the podium, the ancient species maintained their composure, but even they showed signs of strain. The normally serene ethereals flickered with agitated light patterns, while the proud Titan clans whispered among themselves in their booming voices. Council Primate Zethara, A towering figure from the apex species approached the central podium with measured steps. The apex had led the galactic community for millennia, their advanced intellect and natural longevity making them ideal mediators and decision-makers. Zethara's presence usually brought calm to any gathering, but today even this ancient being showed visible signs of stress. "Esteemed representatives," Zethara began, their voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic system, "we face a threat that challenges the very foundation of our peaceful civilization, the entity known as the Voidborn Swarm has breached our outer defenses and is advancing toward the core worlds at unprecedented speed." The chamber fell into absolute silence as Zethara activated the central holographic display. The three-dimensional map showed the galaxy in all its glory, with thousands of inhabited systems glowing like tiny stars. But along the outer edge, a spreading darkness consumed world after world, leaving empty space where vibrant civilizations had existed just days before. "Our combined fleets have attempted to engage the swarm," Zethara continued, their voice heavy with defeat. "The results have been catastrophic. The enemy appears to absorb our technology and adapt to our tactics within hours of each encounter. Traditional warfare has proven not only ineffective but counterproductive, as each engagement makes them stronger." Deho leaned forward, studying the tactical data streaming across his personal display. His military training, though considered primitive by galactic standards, immediately identified several critical errors in the fleet deployments. The Allied forces had approached the swarm like a traditional enemy, using conventional tactics that assumed rational behavior and technological limitations. But if these readings were accurate, they were facing something that operated by entirely different rules. The debate that followed revealed the depth of the crisis. Representative after representative spoke of their species' proud military histories, their advanced weapons, their sophisticated defensive strategies. All had failed spectacularly against the swarm. The Titan clans, whose warrior culture dominated entire sectors, admitted their fleets had been consumed before they could even engage properly. The machine intelligences of the Synthesis Collective reported that their adaptive protocols had been turned against them, their own ships becoming weapons for the enemy. As the discussion continued, Deho noticed a pattern in the failure reports. Every species had relied on the same fundamental assumptions about warfare that had served them well for millennia: overwhelming technological superiority, coordinated fleet movements, and the expectation that enemies would follow predictable patterns. None had considered that they might face an opponent that thrived on chaos and fed on destruction itself. The motion to begin immediate evacuation protocols was introduced by the Silver Assembly, whose merchant fleets could facilitate the largest refugee operation in galactic history. World after world would be abandoned, their populations relocated to the safer core systems, while the swarm consumed the outer territories. It was logical, practical, and represented the best chance for species survival, the vote was called, and delegation after delegation cast their support for retreat. When the voting reached the human section, Deho felt the weight of history pressing down on him. Earth's military advisors had shared their analysis of the situation, and their conclusions differed dramatically from the galactic consensus. Humanity had something the galaxy lacked: recent experience with total warfare, genocidal conflicts, and the willingness to make sacrifices that others found unthinkable. He thought of the billions of beings who would die if the evacuation plan failed, of the countless worlds that would be lost forever, of the refugees who would spend generations fleeing from an enemy that grew stronger with every victory. The galaxy needed someone willing to take desperate risks, and humanity had built their entire civilization on such gambles. Standing slowly, Deho felt every eye in the chamber focus on him. The weight of his next words would echo through history, determining not just humanity's role in the crisis, but their place in galactic civilization forever. He looked directly at Zethara, then swept his gaze across the assembled representatives, meeting the alien eyes of beings whose ancestors had mastered space travel when humans were still discovering fire. "The Terran Federation rejects the evacuation protocol," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. "We are entering the war." The chamber erupted in chaos, but Deho remained standing, his expression calm despite the storm of protests and disbelief surrounding him. The youngest species in galactic civilization had just volunteered to fight an enemy that had defeated them all. The Grand Council chamber exploded into chaos as hundreds of alien voices rose in protest, disbelief, and outrage. Ambassador Lee Dae-ho remained standing at his podium while the storm of reactions swirled around him. Translation devices struggled to process the babble of languages as species after species expressed their shock at humanity's audacious declaration. Ambassador Kim Subin of the Ethereal Collective was the first to restore order, her crystalline form pulsing with agitated light. Patterns. With respect to our human colleagues, she said, her synthesized voice carrying across the chamber. This is not a decision for new civilizations to make. The Terran Federation has been spacefaring for barely 2 standard centuries. Your entire species lacks the military experience necessary to comprehend this threat. A rumble of agreement echoed from the assembled delegates. The massive war chief Thok of the Granite Legion stood, his stone-like features showing disdain. Humans fought with metal sticks and chemical explosives while our fleets conquered star systems. What could your primitive tactics possibly offer? Against an enemy that has defeated our combined armadas? Dae-ho waited for the voices to quiet before responding. Esteemed colleagues, I request permission to present our analysis to the Emergency War Committee. What we lack in technological advancement, we compensate for with strategic insight. Council. Primate Zethara raised one elongated hand, and the chamber fell silent. The human delegation will be granted a brief audience with the War Committee. However, understand that this crisis demands proven solutions, not theoretical contributions from inexperienced civilizations. The War Committee convened in a smaller chamber adjacent to the main hall, its walls lined with tactical displays showing real-time data from the affected regions. The attendees represented the galaxy's most powerful military forces. Admiral Korvex of the Stellar Navy, General Hivemind Unit 7, Commander Flux of the Energy Beings, and a dozen other military leaders whose combined experience spanned millennia of warfare. Dae-ho entered the chamber accompanied by his military attaché, Colonel Park Ji-won, who had arrived on the fastest courier ship available when the crisis began. Ji-hwan carried himself with the quiet confidence of a professional soldier, his bearing noticeably different from the ceremonial postures adopted by most galactic military officers. Honored commanders, Dae-ho began. Before we present our analysis, I must ask a difficult question. When did any of your species last face an existential threat? When did you last fight a war where defeat meant the complete extinction of your civilization? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Admiral Korvex, whose star-spanning empire had known only minor conflicts for over 1,000 years, shifted uncomfortably. The galaxy has enjoyed unprecedented peace and prosperity. Our military forces are designed for peacekeeping and defensive operations, not total warfare. Ji-hwan stepped forward, his expression grim. That is precisely the problem. You have all forgotten how to fight for survival. Your tactics assume rational enemies with limited resources and predictable behavior. The Voidborn swarm operates by different rules entirely. He activated his portable holographic projector, displaying detailed analysis of the swarm's attack patterns. The data showed something that had escaped the attention of the galaxy's greatest military minds. The swarm was not simply destroying civilizations randomly. Their attacks followed a precise psychological pattern designed to maximize terror and despair. Look at their target selection, Ji-hwan explained, highlighting specific worlds on the map. They do not attack the strongest military installations first. They target civilian populations, cultural centers, and communication hubs. They want witnesses to spread fear. They want survivors to tell stories that will demoralize resistance before they arrive. Commander Flux, whose energy-based form crackled with agitation, interrupted. Our analysts identified this pattern weeks ago. The strategic value of psychological warfare is well understood. What insight could humans possibly add? Dae-ho exchanged a meaningful look with Ji-hwan before answering. The insight comes from experience. Earth's history is written in blood and conflict. We have studied warfare not as an academic exercise, but as a survival necessity. While your Species developed faster-than-light travel and energy manipulation. Humans perfected the art of killing efficiently. The blunt statement shocked the assembled commanders into silence. In galactic society, such direct discussion of violence was considered crude and primitive. Warfare was supposed to be conducted with honor, following established protocols that minimized casualties and preserved infrastructure. The idea of fighting with the primary goal of maximum enemy destruction was alien to civilizations that had enjoyed peace for generations. General Hive Mind Unit 7, speaking through their collective consciousness, expressed the group's sentiment. Your species' primitive aggression is precisely why you were granted only observer status in galactic affairs. Civilized beings have evolved beyond such barbaric impulses. Jihuan's smile was cold and predatory. That barbaric impulse is exactly what you need right now. You fight like prey animals because you have become prey animals. Comfortable, soft, accustomed to safety and predictable outcomes. The swarm fights like predators because that is what they are, and they recognize weakness when they see it. Manipulated the holographic display to show detailed fleet engagement records. Every one of your fleets attempted to minimize their own casualties while engaging the enemy. You pulled back when losses mounted, regrouped when formations were disrupted, and retreated when victory seemed uncertain. The swarm interpreted this restraint as fear and weakness. The data was undeniable. Battle after battle showed the same pattern. Galactic forces would engage, suffer moderate casualties, and withdraw to preserve their strength for future engagements. The swarm, meanwhile, pressed every advantage ruthlessly, accepting massive losses to achieve tactical objectives. Admiral Korvac studied the analysis with growing unease. Are you suggesting we should sacrifice our forces recklessly? Such tactics would only accelerate our defeat. Deho moved to stand beside the holographic display, his finger tracing the swarm's advance pattern. We are suggesting you fight to win rather than fighting to avoid losing. There is a fundamental difference. Humans understand that sometimes victory requires acceptable losses, calculated sacrifices, and tactics that civilized beings find distasteful. He gestured to a specific engagement where a Titan clan fleet had retreated after losing 30% of their forces. Your commanders withdrew here to preserve their remaining ships. A human commander would have pressed the attack, using those losses to achieve a decisive victory that would save thousands of ships in future engagements. The uncomfortable truth was that galactic military doctrine had been shaped by millennia of limited conflicts between rational opponents. Wars were fought with rules. Treaties governed conduct even during hostilities, and the ultimate goal was usually political rather than the complete destruction of the enemy. The Voidborn swarm followed none of these civilized conventions. Colonel Park Ji-hwan activated another display showing Earth's military history. Humans have fought 17 major wars that threatened our species' survival in just the past 1,000 years. We have developed tactics for enemies who do not negotiate, who do not follow rules, and who view our extinction as their primary objective. The assembled commanders studied the human military data with growing fascination and horror. The record showed conflicts where entire armies had been sacrificed to achieve strategic objectives, where civilian populations had endured years of siege rather than surrender, and where victory had been achieved through methods that violated every galactic convention of civilized warfare. General Hive Mind Unit 7 processed the information through their collective intelligence before responding. These tactics would be considered war crimes under galactic law. The deliberate targeting of civilian infrastructure, the use of biological weapons, the execution of prisoners, such methods are forbidden for good reason. Deho nodded gravely. They are forbidden because civilized beings should not need to use them against each other. But the swarm is not civilized. They are not rational opponents seeking political objectives. They are an extinction-level threat that can only be defeated by beings willing to match their ruthlessness. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. For millennia, galactic civilization had prided itself on moving beyond the crude violence that characterized primitive species. They had created a society based on cooperation, mutual benefit, and the peaceful resolution of disputes. Now they were being told that their greatest achievement, their civilized nature, was exactly what would ensure their destruction. Commander Flux spoke for the group when he asked the question everyone was thinking. What exactly are you proposing? That we abandon everything that makes us civilized in order to defeat this threat? Jihuan's response was immediate and unflinching. We are proposing that you let humans do what we do best. Earth's fleet may be small and our technology primitive by your standards, but we understand something you have forgotten. Sometimes survival requires you to become temporarily uncivilized. The Emergency War Command Center buzzed with unprecedented activity as beings from across the galaxy worked alongside human military strategists for the first time in galactic history. General Choi Min-soo stood before the massive tactical display, his weathered face showing the strain of 72 hours without sleep. Around him, alien commanders struggled to comprehend the radical departure from everything they understood about civilized warfare. Fleet Admiral Park Ji-hwan materialized as a holographic projection from the approaching Terran Defense Force. His image flickering slightly due to the quantum communication delay. Esteemed commanders, our reconnaissance ships have penetrated deep into swarm territory. What we discovered changes everything we thought we knew about this enemy. The tactical display shifted to show grainy footage captured by human stealth drones. The images revealed something that made even the most hardened alien warriors recoil in horror. The void-born swarm was not a collection of ships or mechanical constructs, but a writhing mass of organic matter that stretched across entire star systems. Living vessels the size of moons pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, while smaller creatures that served as fighters moved in perfect synchronization, like schools of predatory fish. Dr. Han So-young, humanity's chief xenobiologist, appeared alongside the Admiral's projection. Her voice carried the exhaustion of someone who had been analyzing impossible data for days without rest. The swarm is not just a military force, it is a traumatized ecosystem. Our deep scans indicate they were once a peaceful species, possibly similar to the ethereal collective in their original form. Something catastrophic transformed them into what we see today. Commander Flux of the energy beings crackled with skeptical electricity. Even if your analysis is correct, how does understanding their origin help us defeat them? They have consumed 3 star systems and absorbed the technology of our finest fleets. General Choi Min-soo stepped forward, his expression grim. Because trauma creates predictable behavioral patterns, Dr. Han has identified specific trigger responses in their attack patterns. The swarm reacts emotionally to certain stimuli, and emotions can be manipulated. The human strategic presentation began with an analysis that shocked the assembled commanders. While galactic forces had focused on the swarm's obvious strengths, their adaptive technology and overwhelming numbers, humans had identified critical psychological weaknesses. The enemy's hive mind was not the sophisticated collective consciousness found in advanced species, but a chaotic network held together by shared pain and rage. Tactical analyst Song Hye-jin activated detailed behavioral models, showing how the swarm responded to different types of resistance. They become more aggressive when faced with defensive formations, feeding off the fear of their targets. But they show confusion and hesitation when confronted with apparently suicidal attacks. Their programming expects prey behavior, not predator, responses. The alien commanders studied the data with growing unease. The human analysis suggested tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare. Where galactic doctrine emphasized preservation of forces and minimal casualties, the human plan called for deliberate sacrificial attacks designed to confuse and destabilize the enemy's psychological state. Admiral Corvex of the Stellar Navy raised his primary appendage in protest. You are describing tactics that would result in massive casualties among our own forces. No rational commander would order such attacks. Captain Yoon Tae-woo, who had volunteered his battle group for the most dangerous missions, spoke from his position near the human delegation. That is exactly why they will work. The swarm expects rational responses based on self-preservation. They are not prepared to face enemies who prioritize mission success over personal survival. The strategic briefing continued with increasingly disturbing details. Human intelligence had identified the swarm's command structure, a series of massive bioships that coordinated the hive mind's activities. These command nodes were heavily defended and considered untouchable by conventional tactics. The human plan called for simultaneous suicide attacks on multiple nodes, using the swarm's own emotional responses to create cascading failures in their coordination network. Dr. Han So-young presented the psychological warfare component of the O strategy. The swarm retains memories from every civilization they have consumed. Those memories include trauma, fear, and pain that we can weaponize. By broadcasting specific frequencies that trigger their traumatic responses, we can induce temporary paralysis in their command structure. The alien commanders struggled to process this information. The idea of deliberately causing psychological suffering, even to an enemy threatening galactic extinction, contradicted their fundamental values. Yet the alternative was the complete destruction of everything they held dear. General Hive Mind. Unit 7 processed the proposal through their collective intelligence before responding. The ethical implications of such tactics are staggering. We would be deliberately inflicting psychological torture on sentient beings. How do you justify such methods? Daeho answered with the cold pragmatism that had defined human survival throughout their violent history. We justify them by their necessity. The swarm will not show mercy to your civilians, will not spare your children, and will not preserve your cultures. They offer only extinction. In the face of such an absolute threat, conventional morality becomes a luxury we cannot afford. The debate that followed revealed the fundamental divide between human and galactic thinking. Species that had known peace for millennia struggled to comprehend the mindset required for total warfare. They had military forces designed for limited conflicts with clear objectives and acceptable outcomes. Humanity offered something entirely different: warfare designed to achieve victory regardless of cost. Lieutenant Colonel Lim Dong-hyun, Humanities, specialist in asymmetric warfare, presented the most controversial aspect of their strategy. The swarm's greatest strength is their ability to adapt to our technology and tactics. But adaptation requires time and understanding. We propose using tactics so brutal and irrational that they cannot process them quickly enough to develop countermeasures. The tactical display showed human proposals for disrupting swarm formations, ramming attacks by automated vessels, biological weapons designed to cause maximum psychological impact, and coordinated strikes on civilian targets to provoke emotional responses that would disrupt their hive mind's efficiency. Admiral Korvek studied the data with a mixture of fascination and revulsion. These tactics would transform the galaxy into a battlefield where no civilian population is safe. You are proposing to fight monsters by becoming monsters ourselves. Captain Moon Chan-woo, whose reputation for aggressive tactics had made him legendary in human military circles, responded with brutal honesty. The galaxy became that battlefield the moment the swarm appeared. The only question is whether you want to be predators or prey. Civilized warfare is a luxury that requires civilized opponents. The human presentation concluded with a comprehensive battle plan that outlined specific roles for different galactic forces. The technologically advanced species would provide the weapons and ships needed for the campaign, while humans would handle tactical command and execute the operations too brutal for civilized beings to contemplate. Dr. So-young presented the final component of their strategy. Psychological profiling suggested that the swarm could potentially be communicated with once their trauma-induced rage was disrupted. The ultimate goal was not just military victory, but the possibility of transforming the enemy from destroyer to ally. Council Primate Zeth-Ara processed the complete proposal before addressing the War Committee. The human strategy offers our first realistic chance of stopping the swarm's advance. However, implementing their tactics would fundamentally change the nature of our civilization. We would be authorizing methods that contradict every principle of galactic society. The weight of the decision pressed down on the assembled commanders as they contemplated the impossible choice: maintain their civilized principles and face certain extinction, or abandon their moral foundation to preserve their physical existence. General Choi Min-soo made the final argument that would sway the committee. Honored commanders, you speak of preserving civilization, But what value does civilization have if no one survives to practice it? We offer you a path to victory that requires temporary abandonment of your principles to ensure their long-term survival. The vote was closer than anyone expected, but the committee ultimately approved human tactical command by a margin of 2 votes. The decision would need ratification by the full council, but for the first time since the crisis began, there was hope for something other than evacuation and surrender. As the meeting concluded, Daeho found himself surrounded by alien commanders, who looked at him with expressions ranging from gratitude to horror. They had chosen to trust their survival to a species they barely understood, gambling everything on humanity's promise that civilization could be preserved through temporary barbarism. Admiral Park's projection flickered as the communication link prepared to close. Ambassador, our main fleet will arrive at Nexus Station within 18 hours. I hope the galaxy is prepared for what they have requested. War is coming. The combined galactic fleet assembled at the Kethara system represented the largest military force in recorded history. Ships from every major civilization formed massive formations that stretched across space like metallic constellations. Sleek ethereal vessels glided alongside the brutal efficiency of Titan-clan dreadnoughts, while energy being constructs pulsed with barely contained power next to the living ships of the Bio Collective. Commander Lim Dong-hyun stood on the bridge of the human flagship, studying tactical displays that showed the approaching void-born swarm. The enemy force was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, a writhing mass of organic vessels that moved with terrifying coordination across multiple star systems. Bioships the size of asteroids pulsed with alien light, while smaller craft swarmed around them like angry insects protecting their hive. The human tactical approach had horrified Allied commanders during the pre-battle briefings. Where galactic doctrine called for organized formations and coordinated firepower, humans proposed controlled chaos. Captain Yoon Tai-woo's battle group would serve as bait, drawing swarm forces into kill zones where they could be destroyed by concentrated fire from hidden positions. Admiral Park Ji-hwan's voice crackled through the fleet communication system as he addressed the combined forces. All vessels, this is human command. Remember that we are not fighting for territory or political advantage. We are fighting for the survival of everything we hold dear. The enemy shows no mercy, expects no quarter, and understands only strength. Today we show them that the galaxy still remembers how to be strong. The first engagement began when Scout Captain Baek So-jin's reconnaissance squadron encountered swarm outriders near the system's edge. Instead of retreating to report enemy positions as galactic protocol demanded, the human ships immediately opened fire, while broadcasting taunting messages designed to provoke an emotional response from the hive mind. The psychological warfare component of human strategy became apparent as the swarm reacted with predictable rage to the unexpected aggression. Bioships that should have maintained formation broke away to pursue the human scouts, their coordination disrupted by the emotional turmoil caused by facing prey that fought back like predators. Lieutenant Baek So-jin's final transmission was heard throughout the combined fleet as her ship rammed a swarm command vessel twice her size. For Earth, for the galaxy, for everyone who dreams of seeing tomorrow's sunrise. Her sacrifice destroyed not just the enemy ship but the coordination node it contained, causing dozens of swarm vessels to lose cohesion and become vulnerable to Allied fire. The alien crews watched in stunned silence as human tactics unfolded with brutal efficiency. Where they expected careful maneuvering and measured responses, they saw deliberate sacrificial attacks that achieved impossible objectives. Human ships rammed enemy vessels while their crews sang battle hymns, turning suicide into a weapon that the swarm could not comprehend or counter. Admiral Jang Ki-young implemented the most controversial aspect of human strategy when his medical corps began deploying biological weapons derived from swarm biomass itself. The viral agents were designed not to kill, but to induce terror and confusion in the hive mind, disrupting their ability to coordinate attacks effectively. The battlefield became a nightmare of violence that challenged everything galactic civilization believed about honorable conflict. Human Marines boarded damaged swarm vessels not to capture them, but to plant explosive devices that would destroy command structures. The psychological impact on both sides was devastating, but the tactical results were undeniable. Captain Moon Chan-woo's heavy assault squadron demonstrated human boarding tactics that left alien observers speechless. Instead of attempting to preserve enemy technology for study, human forces focused on maximum destruction of swarm infrastructure. They fought through bioship corridors with weapons that cauterized wounds to prevent regeneration, using tactics that would have been considered excessive against any rational opponent. The turning point came when the swarm attempted to use their standard absorption tactic against a human destroyer. The bioship's tendrils reached out to consume the vessel and add its technology to their collective knowledge, but Commander Park Sung-ho had anticipated this response. As the enemy attempted absorption, hidden charges throughout his ship detonated, introducing a computer virus into the swarm's biological network. The virus was a masterpiece of human psychological warfare, designed not to damage their technology, but to flood their collective consciousness with traumatic memories from Earth's most brutal conflicts. The hive mind experienced humanity's genocidal wars, nuclear devastation, and the systematic destruction that had shaped human military thinking for millennia. The effect on the swarm was immediate and catastrophic. Bioships began attacking each other as conflicting impulses tore through their shared consciousness. The coordinated advance that had seemed unstoppable dissolved into chaos as different sections of the fleet responded to contradictory commands, generated by their traumatized collective mind. Dr. Han So-young monitored the psychological impact from her position aboard the medical vessel that served as humanity's mobile laboratory. The viral integration is exceeding all projections. The swarm's collective consciousness is fragmenting as it struggles to process human war memories. They are experiencing our species' entire history of conflict simultaneously. The alien crews began to understand the true horror of what they had unleashed. Humanity had not just offered to fight the swarm. They had weaponized their own traumatic history, turning centuries of violence into a tool for galactic salvation. The psychological warfare was working, but at a cost that challenged the moral foundation of galactic society. Admiral Korvex watched human ships continue their suicidal attacks even as victory became apparent. Admiral Park, your objectives have been achieved. The enemy formation is in complete disarray. Why do your forces continue these sacrificial attacks? Park Ji-hwan's response revealed the calculating nature of human military thinking. Because stopping now would allow them to recover and adapt. We must press our advantage until their command structure is completely destroyed. Mercy at this moment would doom billions of innocent beings across the galaxy. The battle reached its climax when the swarm's Central Command bioship, a creature the size of a small moon, attempted to retreat deeper into space. Captain Yoon Tae-woo's battle group intercepted the massive entity, engaging in a running battle that cost them half their ships, but prevented the enemy from escaping to regroup. The final engagement was a masterpiece of human tactical thinking that horrified and amazed alien observers. Instead of attempting to destroy the command bioship through conventional firepower, human forces used psychological pressure to force it into an impossible situation. They broadcast the memories of every species the swarm had consumed, creating a feedback loop of trauma that paralyzed the creature's ability to make rational decisions. As the command bioship writhed in space, overwhelmed by the psychological assault, human boarding parties led by Colonel Kang Woo-jin penetrated its organic hull. Their mission was not destruction but communication. Dr. Han So-young believed the creature could be reached once freed from its trauma-induced rage. The breakthrough came when human Marines reached the bioship's consciousness center, a pulsing neural network that controlled the entire local swarm fleet. Instead of destroying it, they established communication using the same psychological techniques that had disrupted the hive mind's coordination. For the first time in millennia, the voidborn swarm stopped fighting. The massive bioships hung motionless in space as their collective consciousness processed new information, the possibility that not all encounters with other species had to end in consumption and destruction. Lieutenant Colonel Park Min-jun, humanities specialist in first contact protocols, managed to establish basic communication with the swarm's fragmented intelligence. The conversation that followed revealed the tragic truth behind their destructive rampage. They were the sole survivors of a galactic catastrophe that had occurred millions of years ago, and their destructive behavior was a trauma response to the loss of their original civilization. The immediate tactical victory was complete, but the broader implications were staggering. The Voidborn swarm controlled vast territories beyond the Outer Rim, with biofleets that could either continue threatening galactic civilization or potentially become powerful allies. The choice would depend on whether the traumatized entities could be helped to overcome their destructive programming. General Choi Min-soo addressed the combined fleet as the battle concluded. All vessels maintain combat readiness but cease offensive operations. We have achieved tactical victory, but our strategic objective has changed. We are no longer fighting to destroy an enemy. We are fighting to heal a traumatized species. The cost of victory became apparent as casualty reports flowed in from across the human fleet. Over 60% of Earth's military forces had been destroyed or severely damaged in the engagement. Thousands of human lives had been sacrificed to achieve tactical objectives that conventional warfare could never have accomplished. Captain Moon Chan-woo. The aftermath of the Cathara engagement transformed Nexus Station into a complex mixture of celebration and mourning. Ambassador Lee Dae-ho walked through corridors filled with beings from across the galaxy, all trying to process what they had witnessed during humanity's brutal but effective campaign against the Voidborn swarm. The victory celebrations felt hollow to many participants, tainted by the methods that had made triumph possible. Dr. Han So-young worked around the clock in the station's expanded xenobiology laboratories, maintaining communication links with the swarm entities that had survived the psychological warfare assault. The massive bioships hung in space near the station like sleeping giants, their bioluminescent patterns flickering in slow, hypnotic rhythms that suggested deep contemplation rather than aggressive intent. The breakthrough in interspecies communication came when So-young successfully isolated the trauma programming that had driven the swarm's destructive behavior for millions of years. Working with ethereal consciousness specialists and energy-being telepaths, she developed a method for bypassing the damaged neural pathways that had trapped the entities in their cycle of violence and consumption. Colonel Kang Woo-jin, who had led the boarding operations that established first contact, reported directly to the Emergency Council about his experiences inside the swarm's bioships. The entities we fought are not the monsters we believed them to be. They are survivors of a catastrophe so complete that it destroyed their ability to perceive other species as anything but threats. Their aggression is a defense mechanism, not their true nature. The revelation that the galaxy's greatest threat had been driven by trauma rather than malice created a profound shift in how the crisis was understood. Council Primate Zethara convened special sessions to address the ethical implications of the victory, while military analysts studied human tactical reports to understand how such devastating effectiveness had been achieved with relatively primitive technology. Captain Yoon Tai-woo, whose battle group had suffered catastrophic losses during the campaign, found himself awarded the highest military honors by grateful alien governments. Yet he struggled with the recognition, knowing that his success had come from tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare he had been taught to respect. The swarm entities, now calling themselves the Remnant Collective, began sharing their memories of the ancient galaxy with xenoarchaeologists and historians. Their recollections revealed civilizations that had existed before any current species had achieved sentience, painting a picture of galactic development that challenged fundamental assumptions about the progression of intelligent life. Admiral Park Ji-hwan arrived at Nexus Station aboard his flagship, which bore the scars of dozens of engagements with swarm bioships. His meeting with the Emergency Council was private, but rumors circulated that he had presented detailed analysis of other potential threats lurking in unexplored regions of the galaxy. Humanity's reconnaissance capabilities had identified dangers that conventional galactic surveys had missed entirely. The political ramifications of human military success became apparent during the formal council sessions that followed the victory. Species that had dismissed humanity as primitive newcomers now competed to establish closer relationships with Earth's government. Trade agreements, technology sharing proposals, and military cooperation treaties flooded the human embassy faster than Dae-ho's small staff could process them. General Choi Min-soo briefed the Council's military leadership about the long-term strategic situation revealed by the conflict. The swarm was not unique. Our deep space reconnaissance has identified at least 4 other potential extinction-level threats in unmapped regions. The galaxy's peaceful expansion has been possible only because these entities remained dormant or focused elsewhere. Sobering intelligence forced galactic leaders to confront uncomfortable truths about their civilization's vulnerability. Their military forces, designed for peacekeeping and limited conflicts, were completely inadequate for defending against truly hostile forces. The technological superiority they had relied upon for millennia meant nothing against enemies that operated by different rules entirely. Captain Moon Chan-woo, who had become something of a legend among alien military personnel, found himself assigned to train joint forces in human combat doctrine. His sessions were attended by officers from across the galaxy, all eager to understand how humans had achieved tactical superiority despite inferior technology. The training revealed fundamental differences in how humans and aliens approached conflict. Where galactic forces emphasized preservation of resources and minimal casualties, humans focused on achieving decisive victory regardless of cost. The psychological toll of implementing such tactics was evident in the human instructors, who carried the weight of their violent effectiveness with visible strain. Dr. So-young's continued research with the Remnant Collective yielded discoveries that revolutionized galactic understanding of consciousness and trauma. The bioentities possessed memories spanning millions of years, including knowledge of galactic cycles, where advanced civilizations rose and fell in predictable patterns. Their traumatic transformation had occurred during one such cycle, when their peaceful civilization had been consumed by entities similar to their current form. The revelation that galactic destruction followed cyclical patterns shocked the Council into action. Emergency committees were formed to study historical records and prepare for threats that operated on timescales beyond individual species' lifespans. Humanity's unique perspective on conflict became invaluable for understanding how to break these destructive cycles. Lieutenant Colonel Lim Dong-hyun led the effort to establish permanent defensive positions in former swarm territory, working alongside remnant bioships to create early warning systems for future threats. The cooperation between humans and their former enemies demonstrated the potential for transforming conflicts through understanding rather than simple destruction. The formal recognition ceremony held in the Grand Council chamber marked humanity's transition from observer species to full galactic citizenship. Ambassador Daeho accepted the honor on behalf of Earth, but his speech focused on the responsibilities that came with their new status rather than celebrating their military achievements. We have proven that survival sometimes requires temporary abandonment of civilized principles, Daeho told the assembled delegates. But we must never forget that such methods are tools of necessity, not badges of honor. The galaxy needed warriors, and humans answered that call. Now we must work together to ensure that such extreme measures never become routine solutions. The economic and technological benefits of victory began flowing to Earth within weeks of the ceremony. Advanced alien technologies that had been carefully guarded were now shared freely with human scientists, while Earth's resource extraction and manufacturing capabilities became highly valued by species seeking to rebuild their damaged territories. Admiral Jang Ki-young, who had overseen the controversial biological warfare programs, found himself appointed to head the new Galactic Defense Initiative. His mandate was to prepare combined forces for threats that conventional military thinking could not address, using human tactical innovation combined with alien technological advancement. The long-term consequences of human military intervention became apparent as refugee populations began returning to reclaimed territories. The psychological impact of witnessing human warfare methods had changed how many species viewed conflict and survival. Some embraced the human approach, developing more aggressive defensive strategies, while others retreated further into pacifistic ideologies that rejected violence entirely. Captain Yoon Tae-woo's reconstruction efforts in former swarm territory revealed the true scale of destruction caused by the entities during their millennia-long rampage. Entire civilizations had been consumed, their knowledge and culture absorbed into the bioships that now worked peacefully alongside human engineers to restore damaged worlds. The remnant collective's integration into galactic society proceeded slowly but steadily. Their unique perspective on consciousness and collective memory provided insights that advanced multiple fields of science and philosophy. Dr. So-Young's continued work with their damaged psyches offered hope that other traumatized species might be healed rather than destroyed. The final resolution came during a private meeting between Daeho and the primary consciousness of the Remnant Collective, a bioentity that had been one of the original command vessels during the war. The conversation, conducted through advanced neural interface technology, revealed the full scope of what humanity had accomplished. Your species did something we believed impossible. The entity communicated through waves of bioluminescent patterns. You showed us that survival and compassion could coexist, that strength could be used for protection rather than consumption. We had forgotten such possibilities existed. Daeho's response carried the weight of everything humanity had learned during their violent rise to galactic prominence. We showed you what we learned through our own trauma. Every human generation has faced the choice between becoming monsters or finding ways to remain human, despite monstrous circumstances.